3, 2, 1. This is Dean with the Two Party Podcast, and I am on here, and I'm probably going to mess your name up, but I'm really good at that. But I'm going to try. Sally Powis-Campbell. Did I do it? I got it. You're probably the first name I got correct in like 3 or 4 episodes, or probably like 10, really. So I'm on here with her now to give a little insight. She is the owner and operator of holistichealthyyc.com. She is also a psychologist, and I'm going to allow you to go ahead and give the audience a little bit about yourself, because I feel like I don't think I'm going to keep up with what you've done in your life. So go ahead and share with them, Sally, all about yourself. Tell us your background, where you're from, a little bit of why and what the journey is that got you where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not gonna go with my script bio that goes out to media. I'm just gonna go off the cuff here and really explain where I come from and why I do what I do. So
okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I come from a small town in southern Alberta, farming community. And my dad was an interesting character. And so he practiced Buddhism, and he was a farmer, and he was also a trained neuroscientist. So really interesting guy. But as kids, all kids kind of think like their parents aren't that cool. Like when my dad would meditate in the middle of the living room when I'm trying to have friends over.
Right, you're trying to have friends over, like, don't mind him.
Yeah, and he'd say, I'm enjoying myself, stay out of the living room, and, just all the awkward moments with boyfriends and, that kind of thing. So fast forward to quite a few years to where I'm in university. I move away. He was very firm where, where I'm from, small town, everyone kind of stays there, does, a teaching or nursing degree, and marries their high school sweetheart. My dad was very firm, you're leaving. And I graduated young. So I was 17, and he said, you're leaving town. I don't care where you go to university, but you're going to university anywhere. And I loved school. So it's like, okay. So I moved not too far. I was, about 2.5 hours away, but lived in the dorm, kind of went my independent way. And I always saw myself as an independent kid. But I started to get intense anxiety, started having panic attacks, very depressed, suicidal ideation. And I had a real tough couple of years when I did move away. And that's when I came back to that, weird dad and his weird practices. And, I just thought, hey, I've tried the medication. I've tried everything else. Like, he's on to something. So my dad would lead me through breathing exercises, over the phone. He would lead me through meditations over the phone.
Yeah.
And at the time too, I was seeing a psychologist at the school. I was taking medication, but when I was in those panicked moments or where I felt like I literally couldn't leave my room, he was there and really helping me. So at that time, I was doing science and communications in school, but I got a bit more interested in psychology. So progressing forward, like I really built up resilience. I built up some of these skills, and I eventually went on to be a broadcast journalist. And so I was on TV, national TV, and I loved it. But I loved interviewing people, and I loved hearing their stories, and I always knew there was more. So then, again, skipping a lot of details here, but I went back for a counseling degree, became a registered psychologist, in all the kind of classic, trained ways. So, cognitive behavioral therapy, touched on a little bit of mindfulness. And so once I was done school, I saw, there needed to be more, like meditation, mindfulness, nutrition really helped me. And it wasn't a big core of what my training was in. So really focused my training once I left school and I became a psychologist. I focused my training on health psychology, so nutritional psychology, looking at kind of the whole person, how they exist within their social environment, their career, their families. And again, nutrition and how nutrition plays a role in mood and mental health, and mindfulness and some of those mindfulness exercises, not just meditation, but mindful walking, just mindful living, infusing mindfulness into our day to day. So that's kind of what I do today. I became a mom. I've got 3 kids and growing. And I love working with families. So it's a big part of what I do, but I also work a lot with adults as well, professionals that don't have kids, and just trying to figure out how mindfulness can fit into their lives and how nutrition can help their mental and physical health.
That's amazing. So you have your complete own practice? Is that what I'm understanding? Completely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very awesome. So I want to rewind a little bit because I'm very interested in a few points that you made. So your father, because you reached back out to your father when you were in university. Now I'm assuming then he must always have kind of, I mean, even as a parent, I mean, he must have always had a very light spirit, he must have been kind of a happier type of individual in life. So must have been why you were like, well, how is he so happy to reach back out? I mean, am I right or wrong on that? I mean, was he just one of those guys that was just kind of walking through life okay with things?
Yeah, he is, if you think about any picture you see of Buddha or statue of Buddha, you see this kind of half smile, like Buddha, experienced a lot of suffering, but still there was kind of this,
there was always a peaceful presence when you look at like a picture of Buddha and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Peaceful and content, even in, tough times or rough times. And being a farmer is rough.
That's not easy. That's not easy. And
I
would imagine up there, it's a little harder than what we would have here in the States, because you guys deal with the inclement weather up there.
Yeah. So yeah, just kind of, I was always close with my dad. We were very, very similar, although I wouldn't have admitted that when I was a teenager.
Right. I don't think any of us ever want to admit that we're like our parents.
Yeah. And I won't go all Freud talking about my relationship with my dad or anything like that.
Yeah, of course.
I just felt that connection, and it just seemed like, okay, this is my lifeline.
Well, and I mean, what a great example. I mean, even when as you're younger, you're thinking this is kind of odd and kind of awkward when I have my friends over, but at the same time, when you find somebody in your life, for me nowadays, like we discussed before we got on the show here, I've been on a journey of my own, and for me, it's not just finding myself. It's really about each day just improving, making myself better today than I was yesterday, and each day making that my goal, and then each day also making sure I'm helping one person each day. And then I have several things I've implemented in my life now that. And to me, that's very cool to be able to look at your dad, especially, and just be like, hey, he's onto something that may work for me. It can't hurt to try it, and the fact that it actually worked, I think, is great. And then, like you were saying, so then you went into, of all things, you kind of went into journalism and media type stuff. And so I'm a journalist. I got my credentials sitting up here, but I do freelance journalism as well. And in the climate of the world we're in now, I kind of stepped back from it because it's just kind of so crazy right now. But that's what I do as well. And so I find that interesting that with what you were dealing with through university and being away from home and the anxiety and stress of that, like that was where you went after that. That's kind of odd.
I've always been interested in writing, and I did a family newsletter or newspaper that I delivered under everyone's door on Sundays. So I was always interested in writing and like observing people. So I actually had like whole columns of like observing dad for the night. Like he picked up the remote, he changed the channel, and like that was really what my newspaper was just observing people. So it was kind of like a behavioral science person kind of underneath there, but I really enjoyed writing and communicating. And when it was kind of that choice of, okay, what do I want to do? Like this broadcasting thing is not doing it for me enough. And I applied for a master's of health broadcasting at NYU, and I applied for my master's of counseling. And I went the master's of counseling route because then I could become a registered psychologist, and I could still write.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do the other. So
that's the great part about being freelance, is that you're, even in the midst of a full career, or even going back to school and doing college and a career, you can still freelance write, you can still publish and do the things you need to do. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I enjoy it. I not just enjoy doing these interviews and the podcast, but I actually enjoy some of the freelance journalism. Because I do like conversation. My wife always says, you talk too much, you need to stop. And that's just who I am. It's my personality. I like to think I'm a little extrovert more than others, but at the same time, I have those moments where I'm just completely introvert and I just want to be left alone and just process life. But that's kind of just where I'm at. And so, journalism and freelance journalism, I get to meet people. I get to hear and share stories with other people. And to me, that's what I enjoy about it, more than the writing, because I taught English. I was a tutor for English for quite a few years. So I did a lot of writing. And now as I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't really want to write and type, but I do enjoy conversation and dialogue, which is why I think I ended up with starting the podcast and really moving forward with engaging that way. I don't know, just interesting, just interesting facts. So tell me more about holistic health. With a W, by the way, for the audience. And I like that. It's funny because when I was doing my research, I noticed that, a lot of people would be like, well, that's not spelled right. I noticed it and I was like, that is key. That is awesome, because you're looking at the whole picture is what I'm assuming that all came about. I mean, you're not just dealing with, certain aspects of whether it's counseling, but you're also, like you said, you're dealing with food, mindfulness, you're dealing with all the different things, nutrition, that is really key to the balance of our health.
Yeah. And that's just, it is like looking at the whole person, but also looking at the whole environment around that person. So, like what is the social environment? What are the attachment types with parents? What is there a pandemic going on surrounding them or not? Right? Yeah. Is it a lockdown? Those types of things. And so, yes, I actually started with just the H when I was like kind of considering, starting this thing, moving out of, because I worked in hospitals. And yeah, I kind of came to this term and I saw this term holistic. It's actually a word with a W.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's exactly it. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to get my training in. And so that I can actually, say I do this, that I look at whole people, because we're not, solitary beings by any means.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, a lot of the stuff, I do a lot of lives, just to encourage and uplift right now. I go even on our Facebook page. If you look at my personal Facebook page, it's all music and encouraging messages. And then sometimes I talk about my physical fitness journey. Sometimes I'm talking about my mental health fitness journey. And so that's kind of where I'm at in life, and I have been for the past couple of years, is really what I can do to help others, what I can do to impact my community, what I can do to lift other people up. And I use the platform of Two Party Podcast to do that, as well as just that's the walk of life. People that meet me in person are like, you're exactly like you were on the show. You're doing exactly what we talked about you do. And that it's really what I strive to do. And I do talk a lot about the balance, and I talk a lot about when I do lives, I go on and I encourage, because I have a lot of friends. When I was growing up, it wasn't always, sunshine and great things going on in my life at certain points. And some of it was my decisions as I got older, but a lot of my childhood was really rough. And so I always struggled, I always struggled mentally. I always had depression. I always dealt with these things. And luckily I had a great mom who was good enough to take me. She ended up being an emergency room nurse. She was one of the first women firefighters in Veneta, Oregon. She really, when my father and her divorced, my mother took on a role to raise me and my sister in a way that we were just not going to be, defunct into this world of like the dysfunction of your childhood ruins you. My mom decided, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to work 3 jobs and I'm going to be a mother. And that's what she did. Inspiring. Yeah, she really was. And so what was encouraging is that immediately after the divorce, she put us in counseling. And, a lot of people, even nowadays, it's more, it's more accepted, but even now people are still
has stigma.
It does. And it's so strange because I encourage everybody, and I've been saying this for years, even before I got on this whole kick that I'm on now, but I encourage everybody to find a counselor. It's nothing better than talk therapy. There's nothing better than just being able to reach out to someone that's not in the middle of your life and be able to explain and express yourself and open up. And my mom was good enough that she got us in counseling from the time I was, I believe, 5. And I've been in counseling almost my entire life. Up until probably the past maybe 8 to 10 years, I haven't had a regular counselor, but I have people that accountability people in my life that now I can talk to. And so I do encourage balance. And I've talked a lot about that lately, about not just physical, because I've been on a real journey getting my health back right. I've really been, hitting weights harder, doing more exercise than I've ever done. And I'm almost 45. I'll be 45 next month. And it's like, do I want to have a dad bod, or do I want to actually take care of myself and look better than my dad did? My dad at like 50 something, 60 something, he was looking like a biker, the big beer belly, and, he was in great shape, but he just wasn't the shape you wanted, and I was like, I don't want to be that shape. And genetically, I probably will be. And so I did start that journey. So I always encourage lately is the balance. And I think what I see in reading through your website on just reading about it is that you provide balance. You provide not just the physical encouragement and the nutrition that we need physically, but I think with the counseling side of it, it's so important and that's why I encourage it for people, is it's so important to have that mental balance as well. You can't be healthy physically and not healthy mentally. And then you also can't be, no matter what your spiritual background is, whether you're Christian, whether you're Buddhist, whatever your belief system is, there has to be a balance there too. And it has to be healthy. And that's kind of the things I've been encouraging a lot lately on the show.
Yeah, and balance, it's one of these words that either people like cringe, or they're just like, balance doesn't exist. And so I sometimes, just on that note, is I talk about it more in terms of like, okay, let's just like balance our well-being. So I often use the visual of a Venn diagram. So we've got 3 circles, and in the center is our well-being. The 3 circles are achievement or accomplishment, and that can be things like, making the bed or finishing a major project. The next one, so that's achievement or accomplishment, fun and pleasure. Right? We need fun, we need pleasure, but we still have those in a pandemic.
I was going to say, in the middle of this whole pandemic, we definitely need something. Yeah.
And it might just be, a piece of chocolate. It might be a hot cup of coffee that you actually get to drink from start to finish without microwaving. And that fun and pleasure might be, a Zoom cocktail night with friends or a Zoom games night. Like, it doesn't have to be this major thing. It could also just be, seeing an animal or hearing an animal chirp as you're on a walk, right? Yep. So it doesn't have to be these big check marks, these big events that are pleasure ridden. And then, the other piece is social connectedness and closeness. And this is one where, no matter if it's a pandemic or not, many people do struggle with this. And sometimes it's, feeling like they're getting a sense of closeness just with social media. But sometimes social media can actually make depression worse, and you feel very left out, and you see all these amazing things people are doing. And so when we put those 3 together, like, sometimes one is like way bigger. So like people who work, for example, I was speaking to about 20 surgeons this morning, and I was talking about this, and I said, many of you, your achievement accomplishment is here. Yeah. Right. And that social connectedness, other than your coworkers, is very small. And fun and pleasure, unless you actually intentionally do that, do you have the energy for it? Like, how can we find some balance in these 3? And then there's some people where it's just fun and pleasure right now. Right.
Yeah. Finding any way they can to just stay sane, just to stay upbeat. Yep.
And sometimes that is unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? Like, we know that there's a lot more drinking happening right now, a lot more marketing of alcohol right now. And so I like to talk more in terms of the balance of those 3 things, and having that chance to reflect at the end of the day, and check in, like, where am I at with these 3? what can I do tomorrow to kind of add something to each of those boxes? And something that you mentioned is, having, like, regardless if someone has a counselor, many people have people in their life as those touchstones. So I do have a few clients where they have a buddy that they check in with balance on.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's one of my things is, I talk to my wife, she talks to me, that's obviously the immediate, not just in the relationship of the marriage, but it's also our immediate connection of having an accountability partner. But I also have certain friends that, my circle over the years isn't very big anymore, because I know who I could rely on. And I try to surround myself with people that are not just uplifting, but people that not only want to see me and celebrate my success, but I want to celebrate theirs. So my circle is kind of that way. I like to see people succeed these days. I don't want to see people fail. Whatever I can do to help them up, I try. And so I keep around me a couple people that I know I can, they know to keep a secret. They know how to keep private conversations private. And so those are the people I keep closest to me, and those are the people I check in with, and those are the people that I hold myself accountable, I hold them accountable, and they do the same of me.
It's a two-way.
It is, and that's exactly what we do, because you can't just have somebody always being the accountability partner and you dumping on them. You have to be able to open that door for them to make it an actual fair and healthy relationship between the two of you. And that's kind of what I like to do. And, I tell them, if there's something going on in my life and you see something I don't, please let me know. If there's a mood swing or something I'm doing that's just not me, you please be honest and just let me know. Hit me in the face if you need to let me know, but let me know. And so I found that, even though I haven't been in counseling in years, I learned a lot in counseling. And that's why I encourage, for a lot of people that never have, that's why I encourage it so much, is because I learned coping mechanisms and coping skills through counseling that honestly, if I didn't have, I don't think I'd be sitting right here right now. I don't think my decisions and choices that I had made in the past would have sent me down the same roads, potentially worse, because I wouldn't have coped with situations emotionally the same as I did when I dealt with them with the skills I got. And I think it's important that we, with your situation, what you're doing, I think it's great, because I think this is what we need more of. I mean, my personal opinion, I think people really need to start diving into looking in the mirror at themselves. They need to start understanding why they do what they do, ways to change that. Sometimes it's habits, sometimes, and again, I'm not the professional, but I know sometimes it's habits, and sometimes it's just repetitive behavior becomes kind of like what you do in life. I see a lot of my friends from high school that are still stuck in the same town. They go to the same bar, they sit on the same bar stool, and they've been doing it since they got out of high school. And it's like, guys, you want to grow up, you want to get a house, you want to get, are you going to get a business? What are you going to do? And they're just happy, go to work 9 to 5, get the paycheck, go to the bar. And it's like, that's just not me. I'm just not that person.
Yeah, that self-awareness piece. And like you said too, is, there's habits that we can build. And if you kind of think back to early in COVID, everyone was like, I'm going to change my life. I got all this time at home. I'm going to change every habit I have. And obviously that's not really attainable. Yeah. And I talk to a lot of clients about micro habits.
Yeah.
You've never ran before. We're not going to start with you running a marathon.
What we're going to
start with, what we're going to start with is buying runners. Next step, wear your runners in the house. Break them in. Next step, go for a walk around the block every day. Right? Building up from there. So the micro habits are so important. Just starting small and seeing again those achievements. Because again, if you set, I'm going to be, running every day, 5 kilometers, whatever it is, when you've never ran before, if that's what you're basing that achievement bubble in your Venn diagram on, you're not going to have it, and you're going to feel like failure.
Yeah, I used to run, and I try my best not to anymore. I used to run literally 6 miles a day, every day. And then I got to the point where I was doing 12 miles three times a week. I would do 12 miles a day. And I mean, I think what I did over the course of those years is I ran myself into not ever wanting to run again because I just ran so much.
Endorphins?
I don't know. I used to box a lot when I was younger. I boxed nationally, professionally. And I reached a point in training where I enjoyed running, and I was like, this is great. I feel good when I'm doing it. And then I get back in the gym, I hit the bags and I feel really good. And then there came a point a few years later where I was like, I don't ever want to run 6 miles again. I just don't want to do it. And now I'm back where I'm on this fitness journey. So now I'm back, like, I got to do cardio. So I'm like, I tell my wife, like, can we just go buy a treadmill and I could just jog in place on a treadmill in our house instead of having to go do the street work that I need to do. And she's like, nope, we don't have room for it, And I'm like, I got to go outside and run, and I don't want to. But it's just one of those, like, sometimes I feel like, and what it really is to me is it's my own wall. It's me putting up a struggle against myself. Like, I know it's good for me. I know it. I was good at it. I'm okay with it. It's me just saying, nope, don't do it. It's like me having this struggle with myself internally.
Resistance.
It is. And I know it is. I recognize it, but I'm still like, I don't want to run. I just don't want to run. I don't care what kind of shoes I got on. I don't want to run. And I think I just kind of burnt myself out boxing. We used to run so much boxing and training that it was like, I hated it. It's just kind of like athletes after so long, they just don't even like the sport anymore,
And that's, when I talk to clients about movement, and I've done some training in sports psychology and performance, mindfulness and performance. And something I talk about is, we have to be really mindful of what we find joy in movement. And that can change at different times in our lives, right? And so, like, I've got this journal exercise that I have clients do sometimes where they're trying to figure out, if they like certain activities, but also they're trying to remind themselves why they move, because it feels good, right? And so it's called an exercise feelings journal. And essentially, write down, what are your feelings before exercise, what you do for your exercise, how long for, and then you check in with how do you feel after. So you do that for a course of a few days, and you kind of get a gauge for, like, okay, how do I enjoy moving my body? Not based on, what Instagram says I should be doing, or, Peloton craze. How do I enjoy actually moving my body? Is it the music that really helps move me? And you mentioned having a music background, right?
Yep.
Like, that is a great way to get into flow, like those professional athletes. But it has to be in that movement that you enjoy, to find that flow where it doesn't feel like it's like a strain or an effort to do it.
And I think that's where I'm at, is like with running, it's like, I know I can do it. Like, I know if I have to go chase my dog down the street or my son or whatever, I know I can do it. I don't smoke anymore. I don't drink anymore. I eat really healthy these days. So I've changed all of my lifestyle ways that way. But I know for sure, like, if I go out there, I'm not, like you said earlier, I'm not going to run out there and just go do 12 miles because I'll be dead the next day. But I know for sure I could get out there and do a mile or two if I wanted to. And part of what I've started trying to get myself back into doing is, like you said, even starting with just the baby steps. Like, I literally been going out and just maybe a walk around the block, maybe just a walk around 2 blocks. Or to make it more fun for me, I'll go with my wife and do the window shopping. So it's like, she'll be like, can we go somewhere? And I'll be like, okay, this place is open. And so I'll make it like, that's, instead of me having to go jog or run or walk, it's like, okay, I'll go shopping with you and walk around, because I know you're going to take me all over the place because you love to walk around and look at stuff. So at least that way I feel like I'm still doing it, but it's enjoyable because I get to look at cool stuff to buy. I get to spend time with her. So I try to incorporate it that way.
You get the social connectedness, but
right.
Also being outdoors. There's an approach called nature bathing or nature therapy, and just being outdoors. Some research has shown that, like, 5 to 10 minutes of just being outside, it has the potential to really boost our mood. Yeah. So, I mean, even if it is window shopping outdoors, I mean, in Calgary, where I am, when it's minus 30 Celsius, we don't really like to window shop. So that's why you get more runners here, because it's too cold to walk.
Yeah, you're not going to go slow. You want to get the blood going.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, if you've got movement and you've got outdoor time, like, that too has benefit. And if you find intrinsic motivation to do that, which is, motivation that comes from inside, as opposed to extrinsic, like I want to look a certain way, I want to weigh a certain weight. It's way more effective long-term to find that thing that is that internal motivator, right? And if that chance to connect with your wife, that it sounds like that's a big motivator in there.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we're always busy too, with the pandemic. I'm a general contractor. I've been doing construction 27 years. So we own a business. And so I'm always tied up with business stuff. I do the podcast show. I'm meeting with people all the time. I have other investment interests that I do in other businesses with other people, partners. And so, yeah, I'm busy. And the thing is, my wife, up until this past year, she's had a lot of health issues going on that has literally caused her to not be able to work anymore. And this is like, she's 36 years old and has full blown glaucoma to the point where she's legally blind now at 36. And so she's really had a tough year. And so I try to balance out, like, even though I got to keep the bills paid, I'm trying to balance out being there for her as much as I can. And we also decided, even before the pandemic, we decided this year we'd try homeschooling my son, and so we started him doing that before the pandemic even came about, before all the lockdowns and stuff. And so we started that. So she's busy, when I'm out working, she's busy kind of helping get him and his education moving forward. And I, when I'm home, I try to be part of that as well, but mainly just kind of spend time. So again, like you said, being able to even go and like incorporate or cheat, I call it cheating. I'm cheating my running exercise by going and having fun with my wife. But that's it. It gives me that little opportunity, because I think a lot of times, successful or failed marriages, there's times where we know, no matter what the situation may be, there's times where we know we could have done better. And I'm trying to be a better husband, a better father, and I'm trying to recognize in myself where, yesterday I could have sat on the couch on a recliner and watched Netflix and ignored everybody in my household. Or I could come up with some fun little quirky way that I could go spend time with them. Or, maybe just ask, hey, Devin, my son, hey, what do you want to do? He does jujitsu, competes. He's kind of he's a great kid, super smart. And he's just one of those things, like, he'll sit around and read a book all day and ignore you. So it's one of those, you kind of got to get in there and shake him up to get him to, like, come on, guy, let's go do something, So I try to find little ways like that to interact, because like you said, social interaction is so important. Obviously as human beings, we're meant to engage with each other.
We're social beings.
We are. And I think, this pandemic definitely has been a struggle I know my wife, because, she's one of those, she loves to get out and about. She loves to go, she's not a big shopper. She's just the person that goes out and looks for the deals. So she loves to go in every store in town, if she could, she'd go every single day of the week to every single store 5 times a day. And that's how she relieves stress. That's how she just copes with life, is like, I get to go window shop and find good deals on stuff. And half the time she just doesn't even buy anything. She just kind of wants to go look what's available. But I think it's, for me, it's kind of, I'm helping myself by trying to find these little ways of improving myself, by also being able to help improve their life by me being there. And some days she doesn't like that either. She's like, get away from me. But that's part of the marriage, Yeah.
And sometimes for people, social connectedness is listening to friends speak on podcasts, and it really feels very intimate and as though you're there. And I know for myself, when there's been those moments when I kind of feel alone as a mom, also homeschooling kids and running business and trying to be a good partner. And keep my health up is, sometimes I listen to mom podcasts, and I kind of feel like I'm hanging out with a couple moms, like, and I don't feel alone, and I feel like I've got that connectedness. So again, it can look like so many different things for everyone. And I don't know about you, but right now we're in lockdown, so we can't actually see anyone.
Right.
So it's something where, we got to get creative. And if we're over the Zoom calls, like, maybe it's going for a walk and listening to a podcast that makes you feel not alone.
Yeah. And for me, it's always been, and even to this day, it still is for me. I obviously I started doing more podcast listening, because obviously I'm in podcasting, and I need to kind of know, who's out there, what person. Sometimes I'll just listen to podcasts in order to find new guests, or to find other podcasters to cross platform with that I love their show. So sometimes I'll just find somebody and I'm like, man, their show is so cool, and I love the way that their dialogue is. I have to go either be on their show or have them on my show. And so sometimes I listen to them for that. But the main thing that's kept me sane, honestly, over all these years is music. I literally love it, and it doesn't matter the genre. You know, people look at me crazy because if you look at my personal Facebook page, I go from hip hop and rap to country to, I mean, to classical music to, like, people are like, "What is wrong with you today?" Like, you just posted like 2 Live Crew, and then 2 seconds later you posted Bach and Beethoven. And I'm like, sorry guys, I like music. It changes my moods. It helps my moods. Honestly,
there's a reason there's a whole line of therapy in music.
Yeah. And it really, to me, that is my center. Like, between working out and music, that really keeps me grounded. It keeps me centered. It's literally one of my early counselors, that was one of their coping mechanisms for me, was to listen to music. You know, that was one of their things for me when I was younger, and I had a lot of anger, and I went through a lot of stuff, and they were like, let's try music, you know, and then they started me listening to music. And then as I got a little older, it was, you know, kind of a change dynamic, went from music to, like, you know, now let's not just try to make music, but let's try to express yourself through the music. If you feel rough today, sing Slayer. If you feel good today, sing some happier songs, John Denver or something. And so it kind of was like, it kind of helped me with coping that way. And now, you know, sometimes I get mad at something or whatever goes on, and I'll jump in my truck, take a ride, and I'll crank that music right up to something that expresses exactly what I'm feeling.
Music has been a huge theme since really, especially this year, in my practice, and you know, just in connecting with teens, with adults, in terms of having it as a coping mechanism. And some popular ones has been, you know, for adults, like, make a mixtape, you know, go on Spotify or some streaming and make playlists, right? So, like, I've got different playlists from, like, I've got a mama chill, like, if I'm like bound up and the kids drive me bananas,
something to help you wind down.
Yeah, so this winds me down. And if I'm in a good mood and I want to be in an even better mood or keep good times rolling, or like we're driving to the snowboard hill, then I also have one where it's mama's road tripping. Like,
there you go.
Try to be playful with it. And then I've also got lists that I can't play when the kids are around, and it's all 90s hip hop.
Yep, exactly. I got the same thing. I'll turn on, my wife's like, where did Devin hear that song? And I'm like, I might have had my Pandora playing Tupac. I don't know.
But it's been so helpful for some of my clients, where it's been a chance to connect with their teen selves or their selves, you know, in simpler times, like when they didn't have as many responsibilities as they have now, or just connect with those moods and identities that they had, and really, you know, find ways to align themselves. But it's also been a part of supporting people who have transitioned to working at home, where they never had that before. And I found, and I even saw this with my husband, where, you know, he's really looking forward to not having his commute the first couple of weeks of pandemic. And then, you know, a lot of people started to realize, and I heard this a ton in my practice, but that was my buffer, right? Like, I got to make the phone calls to people uninterrupted. I got to listen to songs I wanted to listen to podcasts.
Sometimes it's just being silent and driving. Sometimes it's like letting everything go and be silent in your car and drive. Yeah, that's totally, I understand that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of businesses now, it's working at home, you know, going forward is probably going to be a lot more common.
I do. I believe that too.
And so what I've talked to clients about is, like, let's have a song, like one song, you know, it's only 4 to 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, depending what you're listening to, but pick your buffer song between work and home work, right? Even if you're in your office, you know, have your earbuds in, or if you need to kind of walk outside, go sit in your car, do pretend errands, just find that way to find that buffer for you, instead of just work home, and just find that joy that music can bring. It's incredible what music can do for the mood.
Yeah, and you touched on something that kind of hit me right there, was about how some music kind of brings us back to a time or a period in our life where Like like you said, it was simpler, or things were just maybe happier, or just a part of our life that we just really enjoyed and reflect on. And one of the things music does for me when I listen to like old school hip hop or things that I grew up on music wise, it not just brings up the memories of that time period, but what it does for me, and maybe it's just the way I think, what it does for me is it gives me an opportunity. In my younger days, I was such a fast adrenaline junkie type of person that I never took time to look and reflect on anything. I was just that guy. If you told me it couldn't be done, I'd show you it could be done, no matter if it was good or bad for me. And so I find when I get to look back, like you said, at those simpler times, I actually now get to reflect on who I was then, how I was then. Sometimes for me, it's sometimes painful to look at like how I was and how I treated those around me at those times. But it gives me, to me, it's a healthy way to process, because I get to actually filter through who I really am at the core, who I really was. And why I was the way I was back then is always a question to me. I don't want to be 70 years old and still be having these questions. So I've taken time now to kind of like, why was I a jerk back when I was in my 20s? Why was I, into this at 30, And so I really have taken time to kind of, like you said, look back at some of the simpler times where, even though back then it was simpler times, I didn't take time to process and reflect life. Yeah. And so it's fun for me, it's fun and a coping mechanism to be able to look back at those things in a healthy way and say, why did I do that? Was that a good thing, a bad thing? Why did I treat this person this way when in looking at the situation I didn't need to or wanted to or even have to? Kind of reactionary stuff, I guess, reflecting. It just that you touched on that's just very interesting, because I do look back a lot at the past, and I know we're always told, like, we always hear society and everybody tell us like, you shouldn't dwell on the past, and while I agree with that to a degree, I feel like you almost have to process that stuff to really understand where you are, who you are, and obviously to make it where you can move forward in to me, happiness, to have a content life.
Yeah, and music can be that deep dive, and music can also be that thing that is meditative, that we just listen to the lyrics and we get lost in them. And it can be an escape as well. And so I think that's why I love music, because it can be so many things depending what you need it to be. And it's something, again, it's meditative. It's kind of like listening to a mantra or a chant or a hymn in church. Without having to set aside 20, 30, 40 minutes to sit down on a cushion and meditate.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I've always loved about music is, to this day, music unites. I don't know. I actually talked about this with a musician I interviewed the other day. I have never met anybody that I've ever gone and like music starts playing, or we go to a concert or something, and they're like, man, this sucks. I've never met anyone that's like, music, this sucks. Nobody. I've never gone.
I cannot wait for music festivals again.
Yeah, I can't either. But I'm like, I've never met. I was telling him, I've never met anyone ever, even my grumpy old grandpa, like that hated everything. That man still, if you turned on a song, he'd love it. It was like, oh, music's on, and he'd act all silly. But it was like, I've never met anybody that just hates music or just is miserable when music comes on. Even if it's music they don't like, it's still that, like, you'll catch them kind of nod their head or tap their foot, because music just kind of unites. It just brings something out of us, I guess maybe it's something primal, like we just, the beat of a drum, like Tribes or something, just it brings something out in people. And I think it's healthy. I think it's good.
It is. All ages.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. My son, because he does the kids classes at jiu-jitsu and stuff. They just moved into the adult, but he does the kids. And I love at the dojo where he goes, the family that's there are really cool people, and they'll turn the music on for these kids. And some of them are, they're little kids. They're little 4 or 5 year old kids, and they'll turn the music on while they're training and wrestling with each other and trying to get each other in headlocks. And it's so funny because they're just bouncing around to the music. And to me, like, I go there and I watch my son train, but it's like I'm having more fun watching the little kids dance to the music than I am watching him actually learn the sport. It's like, it's kind of fun, Tell me a little bit about, now this is one I'm interested in, because I am, and I think I was reading on your thing here that you're a kind of a foodie as well. So food. Let's get into a little bit of that for the audience, because I think I many years ago, I started changing. I had 2 bad faulty heart valves. And
Okay.
for a period of time, my doctor, when I was in Florida, before I moved out of Florida, they were going to go and do open heart surgery. They were going to change both valves out. The mitral and the aortic was bad.
Mhm.
I moved from Florida to Oregon to like all over the place and transitioned, and I ended up here somehow. I don't even know why. I ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I changed things around. When I met my wife, I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking, partially because she would have never married me if I didn't, but also because I knew it was just not conducive to my health. And when I got to my first cardiologist here, because I had to check in every 3 months, I had to have a checkup because the valves were so bad. And I started to go to this cardiologist here, and he goes, all right, we had our first visit. He goes, yeah, things are rough. Things are not looking, we'll reassess this in about 6 months.
Mhm.
And I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. I started exercising. I started getting more healthy, and eating right. And that was like one of the biggest things is like, I wasn't eating fast food. I wasn't, just because I was hungry out and at work and I had nowhere to go make real food. I wasn't just going to a drive-through. And so
Yeah.
I started being more aware of like what I'm putting in my body. And I went back 6 months later, and he did the full workup, the full scan, the whole nine. And he's like, I don't, you can attest it to a miracle, or he says you can just attest it to the fact that you're not drinking, smoking, and eating like crap. But your heart valves at this point are really good, and we're going to clear you from surgery at this point in the near future until anything changes. He goes, because I don't think at your age you want me to change out valves and you would be living on medications the rest of your life, and potentially you could, there's things that happen during surgery you could potentially
Mhm.
not come to. And he goes, so I really don't want to put you through that, but I do want you to know that your diet probably played the biggest part between the smoking and drinking going away. He said your diet is probably 99% of really where your organs and tissues are starting to really mend and get the
Mhm.
nutrition they needed. And so
Mhm.
that was really like an impactful thing for me that at that time. And great cardiologist. He was just really amazing the way he explained how the diet is just such an impactful thing, especially on the heart. And so tell me a little bit about that, because I hear a lot locally. There's places here that talk about when they work with kids, even through therapy. Diet in kids is very important too. And I don't think a lot of people understand, you can't just keep feeding your kid McDonald's. They really need really good, healthy nutrition.
Mhm. Yeah, so I take a couple of approaches to food. So the one approach is nutritional psychology, and fancy words for food and mood. So we know that food impacts mood, and we know mood impacts food choices.
I'm
So
always grumpy without food. I am the
yeah.
grumpiest man on the planet.
And from a nutritional psychology perspective, we don't just look at what we're eating, but we also look at timing. So when it comes to timing of food, we want to eat within 90 minutes of waking, and we want to eat every 2 to 3 hours. We want to make sure that we have fat, protein, and carbs in every snack and every meal. So that means you don't just have an apple, which is just
Mm-hmm.
carbs. You have an apple with some cheese, or an apple with some cottage cheese, or with nuts. Like, you need to kind of pair, so you're not just having carbs. And the reason for both the timing and composition for foods is that you really want to make sure that you're monitoring your cortisol levels. So cortisol is our stress
Mm-hmm.
hormone.
Yep.
And when we have, say, just an apple, while it's healthy, low calorie, it's fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Apples are great. I love apples. And my youngest's first sentence was apple a day. So I love an apple.
Yeah.
And my dad, who I mentioned at the very beginning, it's his favorite food,
Right.
bar none. Except now I have him eating it with nuts.
Yeah.
So an apple, I mean, it's great, but you eat just that apple and your cortisol levels go through the roof,
Right.
which leads to irritability, which leads to stress, which leads to inflammation.
It's
Okay,
just
so
not enough.
it's not that it's not enough. It's that your body, the blood sugar goes
Yep.
up really high, and then it causes your body to create stress hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is your body then has a spike in insulin. So
Okay.
you kind of like, your energy and your mood
Just
will
up and
mix.
down, up and down.
Mhm. Same with if you haven't eaten anything. And again, you'll have people who will, share about intermittent fasting, and I'm not here to debate anything. It's more, I come from that approach of nutritional psychology where we talk about Mediterranean diet. It's the one that, people adhere to the longest.
One of the healthiest too, is what I was always
It
told.
is. Yeah. So I did some training last year at the beginning of pandemic when we were all like, hey, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I did a course in nutrition online with Harvard, and that's just it. You want to look at a few different things. You want to look at overall like health value, but is it actually adherable?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at keto diets, you look at intermittent fasting.
I tried the keto diet while I was doing my fitness last year, and I was working out, hitting weights hard. I started out doing like a kind of a bodybuilding diet, like prepping for a show, and it was 5 meals a day, low to no carbs, no sodium, 0 sugar. I started feeling like diabetic. Like I started feeling like I was not going to make it. And so I just told my wife, I was like, I can't do this anymore. It was hard enough eating 5 meals.
Need energy.
Yeah, it was hard enough eating 5 meals, but like taking all the stuff and making it like the keto stuff, I was like, this isn't for me. I can't do it.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we're getting a good variety in our diet, and that's the key. Is don't not about superfoods and getting those magic. There's no such thing as a magical ingredient. The key is, again, we come back to this whole balance idea, right? Yep. Like, is your plate balanced, or are you eating the same thing every day because an influencer told you to, or was paid to tell you to?
Right.
So from a nutrition perspective, that principle is the same, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult. And so that's kind of the nutritional psychology side of things. And then mindful eating is about, being mindful, like listening to hunger and fullness cues. Children, babies come out having really strong hunger and fullness cues. And as adults, we sometimes override that by, based on like a lunch hour or, certain times that we eat at. And again, you want to eat every 2 to 3 hours. So there's a balancing act there. But with adults, often there's, oh, this is a good food, this is a bad food, can't eat this. And then there's restriction cycles, which then lead to binging. So we kind of override those urges and that hunger and fullness, try to tell ourselves, you can't have this, or you can't eat at this time. So we can learn so much from kids. In terms of, being present with our food, squishing our food, using all our senses, smelling it, listening when you're chewing it, feeling it on your tongue. And so often we're rushing through our days, and food is just something we kind of scarf down. And, part of the digestion process is, chewing our food.
Right.
And eating slower. Otherwise, we have indigestion.
Yeah.
Right?
If you don't chew something up all the way, it's not going to be as easy to process once it reaches down in your stomach. Yeah, it makes sense. Totally.
I love this ride. Music to food.
Right? It's great. It's balance. Great. It is. It's balance. And obviously we touched a little bit about exercise, but one of the things that's highlighted here that I'm seeing here on your page here, and we just moved into the food. So I'm going to just move into art. Gratitude journaling is something I've discussed on the show before with several other guests. And I honestly can't express more how important it is to journal life. And I can admit I'm not as good at it as I used to be as far as the writing of it. My wife is faithful. She journals every day. She started last year a journal where me and her journal to each other. So when we're super busy and we don't have time, she'll write a little entry into it, and she'll set it on my side of in the living room next to so I know she wrote something. And then it's my turn. I'll grab it and I'll respond to hers as well as add my entry. And so we started doing that, which is, to me, that was very cool as a couple in a marriage. I thought that was a very fun thing she started. But journaling is so important. And one of the other things I think that I'd love for you to touch on is like art. Because I've also had another guest on that brought that up, that art, it can be such a great expression for mood, emotion, and just health.
Yeah, and much like music, I mean, there's a whole area of therapy that is art therapy. And I'm trained as a play therapist, and I take that approach with adults too. And we bring in some arts, some Play-Doh.
I feel like I missed the bus, because anything that says play therapy, like that should be my career, because I love toys, playing. Like I go in my son's room, I'll build Legos all day. like I missed the bus. I'm on the wrong career.
Hey, it's, there's always time. Career change. I mean,
Right.
Seven careers they say people will have. It sounds like you've already got 7 careers on the go.
My resume is ridiculous. Not even, it doesn't even touch yours, but for real, I've done so many crazy things and career wise and changed positions. And it just, I'm one of those, I call it my every 7-year itch. I get a 7-year itch.
Yeah.
I've been doing construction 27 years. I have had businesses and gave them up and sold them and moved and then came right back to construction years later. I got computer engineer's degree. I owned a computer repair business. I hated it, went on. You name it, I've probably been a part of it. And I've reached this 7-year period.
I'd love to read journals.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm bored with it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm going to start doing this now.
Yeah, no, just in terms of journaling, I mean, it can be so many things. I've got my agenda here, and like as an example, it can be just like one block that's just gratitude that I just like. What was my gratitude last night? Vegetables that make me feel nourished.
Hey,
this is candid. This is actually what I wrote down there.
Right back to my favorite love, food.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder what was the day before. Books. It was just one word, books.
Yeah.
And so that can be journaling. Doodles. So I also doodle in my agenda. So my agenda is like that place where I track that achievement, that balance piece. It's the place where I have my to-dos. It's the place where I list my ta-das, like the things I did that I forgot to put on my to-do list, but I still want to put a check mark beside. My ta-das.
It's almost momentary. It's almost momentary expression, really, when you do stuff like that. Even like you said, even one word or a doodle. I mean, it's just a momentary expression of how you're feeling at the moment and reminding yourself.
And then, it can be free-flowing thought on, 5 blank pages. I just always encourage people, like anything, if one is struggling, then that journaling exercise, we just need to be careful if it's something that just makes us feel worse. And so for some of my clients, we set time limits. And we say like, okay, here's some guiding questions. Or it's really specific. Like I've got an exercise feelings journal, like I mentioned. I have a music journal where people listen to songs and they write with some prompted questions. Gratitude journals. And just to touch on with my book, I talk about journaling in it, and journaling can be doodling, like drawing what you're grateful for, and journaling can be, saying like, here are some things that I'm grateful for. Here's some things that I learned today.
And I think that's important that we got to recognize those things. I when I was younger, I was diagnosed with a photographic memory. It's not so good anymore because of years of just being making some poor decisions, we'll say. So my memory is not as great as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. And so my wife's always like, well, you need to get your own personal journal still, because I used to for years and I just don't anymore. And so I'm like, you're right. You're always right. However, I do journal in my head. And she's like, that's cheating, because then you can't reflect on it and you and I can't go through it. And I'm like, I know, but so yeah, I always find these little ways to cheat through things, I guess. But that's been mine lately. It's been like, well, I remember everything.
Or cater it to what you're looking for.
Yeah, and she tells me I need to get it out. That's her thing. She's like, yeah, not only are you cheating, but you're not getting it out. And I'm like, you're right. I'm just building up this big clogging my memory. But yeah, it's just one of those like. I always encourage people in the audience, because I feel like when I was doing it, when I was younger, and even through my 20s, I was journaling. And I feel like it was something that was so impactful for me, to the point where there was times where I was like, I forgot one day or something, and I would come back the next day to journal and be like, oh, I forgot yesterday. And it was kind of a little disappointment. I was like, that's a bummer. I didn't get in anything yesterday. And so it is really encouraging. And it is, one of the biggest things, one of my counselors that got me into journaling had told me is, this isn't just for you to write down and express right now. This is for you when you're at a healthier point in your life and in a good time of your life. This is for you to reflect back on. And there was a few years later in my 20s that I did that. And I grabbed a couple journals that I had in a box, and I was like, let me see what this, and I started reading. I'm like, that was me. Like I wrote that. Like, what was I doing that day? And it was just kind of fun to go through because I was in a better mind state. I was in a healthier place, and I was able to look at it objectively and be like, this is kind of like, who is this guy? But at the same time, I'm kind of cool. I'm all right. I could live with me. Because there was a period of time where I didn't love myself. I didn't like myself. I was always critiquing myself. And when I was able to, at a healthier point, be able to look at these journals and go, man, I really love this guy. He's kind of fun. And it was neat. It was great to be able to feel that. And that's why I try to express that to the audience, that that's something they should do, because it's healthy, but it does bring a great feeling back to you to be able to remember little things that you wrote and thought about at different points in your life.
The reflection.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me a little bit about, I really was thinking more along like the kids side of things and family, because I know you touch on that as well. And then after that, let's get into your book. I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about maybe just a couple easy, quick things that maybe as struggling parents with children, maybe difficult children. I hate to use the word difficult children, but that maybe somebody in the audience maybe could hear, that you could give them some advice that maybe could make it a little easier on them, whether it's with patients or whatever, within a household that's kind of maybe disruptive or having issues with figuring out a kid. Because sometimes it's really about just kind of figuring out our kids. Each individual is a different person, and they're going to act different. They're going to behave different. And sometimes it's about honing in on what it is. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. And speaking of kids, I've got to go get one of mine.
I was going to say, we're running pretty good. We're running pretty long.
Yeah. So yeah, just, you know what, I'm actually going to keep this one short and sweet, because I think that there are so many parenting manuals out there, and they become overwhelming. And so I've got this acronym that I share with parents, and the acronym is HALT, right? And so HALT, as in like stop. So the H, so essentially what you want to do is, if your child's acting up, and you want to kind of check in. Okay. So H, is my child hungry? A, is my child angry right now? L, is my child lonely? And T, is my child tired? And honestly, for adults, we can also check in with our partner if they're really kind of being irritable, or we're having trouble communicating, is checking in with our partner. Okay, let's halt and let's check in. And again, this is part of mindfulness, and creating that pause instead of just kind of pushing through. It's like, oh, got a temper tantrum, we're just going to kind of push through this and get through it. Is like trying to learn to halt. And so we've got it up in those areas in our house where, sometimes, behaviors can act up, whether it's, brushing teeth in the kids' bathroom, or if it's in, the back door where we have to kind of get ready and sometimes we're rushed. And then I encourage families around me to do that, as well as kind of have that check-in so your child feels heard. And in this pandemic, that is very important.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that too, because I was just going to say, in the middle of this pandemic, I hear a lot of families struggling because they're all home. It's crazy. We always want to love and be close with our family and all, but we don't realize how busy things were before the pandemic, that mom was here and dad was here and the kids were at school, and now everybody's home. And it's like, a lot of people don't know how to cope with it. They're like, wow, we're all in this crazy house, and we're all these crazy family, and we're stuck in together, and they're having a hard time with it. But that's very good advice, to just halt and really analyze what's going on.
And then just mindfulness activities. And again, not getting kids having this expectation that kids will meditate, but in my book, and I call it a playful guide for families, in that, okay, how can we playfully, or just, infuse mindfulness throughout the family life? And so, rock a stuffy is one exercise where you have your child put their stuffed animal on their stomach, lie down, and rock their stuffy to sleep by taking deep belly breaths.
That's
right.
Cool.
And that's a really popular one. And then journaling, touching on what we talked about, making music. So having kids, make music, and
my son loves that. Yeah, my son loves that.
And their sense of hearing. So if we think about a very basic level of mindfulness, to be present is to be present with one or more of our senses. And so the ears, right, and listening. And if you're working on with your kids and getting them to listen more, have practices where you're focusing on that same skill.
I got to work on that. I got to work on that. My son doesn't listen. Nah, he's super good. So tell me before we get off here, I know you got to go. Tell me a little bit about, first off, tell me a little bit about the book, obviously, and then tell me what inspired you to write the book.
Yeah. So my book, Mindful Mamas and Papas, Playful Guide to Mindful Living, is a book for the whole family. And essentially, it's not a textbook parenting book that sits on your side table and gathers dust like I had before and, shortly after I had my first. It's more of something that you can just pick up, and there's different sections. So there's a parenting and partnering section, because the partnering piece is also important, and many parenting books don't even touch on that.
Right.
But and partnering, I also talk about, if you're a single parent, like partnering up with other caregivers around you, asking for help, setting your intentions as a parent and taking, what are those values from your upbringing and your parents that you want to take with you? And what are ones that maybe you want to learn from, right? So it starts in that place, and then it moves forward into mindfulness, like meditation, breathing exercises, a section just on creating. So got things from crafts to, essential oils, and many of these are research backed too. Movement and play, which is so important. And then I got a great big section on food. So how we can play with our food and how we can bring mindfulness to our food, make food art, because kids love playing with their food. So you may as well make it an exercise. But also for adults, how they can play with their food, eat more mindfully. I've got a chant in there, it's not a prayer, but like more of a chant of gratitude with our food. How we can have a gratitude practice with food. So it's really something that kind of spans, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure, where in certain sections or in certain pages, it'll say, if you want to kind of add to this one, go to this page.
Jump to this section. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I try to make it really interactive and fun, and it's full color. And let's pretend I've got it.
Right.
I should have it, but I've got a bunch of digital downloads too on my site that I pulled from my book. So everything from tech contracts, and because tech use and pandemic or not.
I think we're at a digital age. Yeah, we're at a digital age. I mean, and it can be used. I've heard a lot of people talk about how it can be used for therapy, not just in the Zoom meetings, but there's different things you can do, computer software and stuff that you can
utilize.
And there's
pros and cons. Yes. I think that we need to have just an episode on tech use.
I think we do too, and probably
mindful tech use
and the healthiness of it and unhealthiness of it. I would agree. Yeah. I would agree.
And going back to my training, I mean, that's what a lot of my research was media and how it can play a positive role. And later today, I've got an interview with a documentary maker, and we're just talking about selfie culture and how it's impacting parents and children. So, it was just, my book really kind of spans everything. And I started writing it when my first was about 6 months old, and I literally felt like I could not breathe. Right. And the anxiety that I got when I first went to university started really creeping back, and I kind of hit the pause button, and I went back to what I knew really helped me, and that I lost somewhere in that journey towards parenthood. So it was a long journey to write it. I didn't force it. I took, little mini writing retreats where I, went into the mountains, went to Montana, and just took time to myself, full days. And I just, sat and wrote and created.
Nice. So a lot of research went into, a lot of time. I love it. I love it. And so tell us real quick, tell us where the audience can find the book, where they can pick up a copy of it. Tell us also where you would like, we'll post all the links on the show and on the episode. Tell us where you would like them to find you, social media or even the website. Tell us all the locations they can touch base with you.
Yeah. So my website for my private practice is holistichealthyyc.com. But in terms of my book, there's tons of resources. And so you can download and get it instantly to your inbox. And some of the tools as well are nutrition based. So I've got like, a great infographic just on like baking a Buddha bowl or making a jar salad. So I've got lots of downloads on there that aren't just for parents. So that site is mindfulmamasandpapas.com.
Okay.
On social, on Instagram, I'm at holistic with W, health mama.
Okay.
So holistic health mama. And then I also have a mindful mamas and papas. So at mindful mamas and papas. So you can reach me there, direct message me there. I love sharing resources and just, interacting with my audience there. And I also have a lot of resources that are nothing to do with my businesses. And I love promoting.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome that that our audience can find resources like that throughout. A lot of people focus on their website or they focus on, one page or something. I think it's important. I try to do it not just on the podcast platforms, but even on my personal pages. I try to provide something of substance to everybody. So it's not just coming on my page. Like Facebook's a different story. That's all music and fun and encouraging stuff. But I mean, some of my other ones you go on, you'll find cars, you'll find where I like cars, and I'll give tips on where there's car stuff you can buy, or, so I find it's really good that you do that. You cross platform between, where you can offer resources that help people. Sally, it's been great having you on here. We definitely need to do another episode. Because I feel like there's so much more I do want to touch on.
Just scratching the surface.
We really are. And I feel like with your credentials, as well as just your professionalism and who you are in this interview, I just feel like there's so much more we can touch on that our audience would be able to really reward from. I think they could really pick up on just some of the things that you can share. Not just in small capacity, but just some of the things that you experience with your clients that you could share that might be beneficial. And so I look forward to having you in the future come back on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for being so open and engaging.
Yeah, I try my best. I'm me. At the end of the day, I'm me. But I, the thing is with the show, I do this and I provide the platform because I really want it to reach people. If this episode helps one person, that's the key. But I use the platform for that, for self-improvement, for mental health awareness, for suicide awareness. Like I try to be there for people. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to, I enjoy this. And part of me, not just loving and engaging with guests like you, I enjoy it, but it's also for me, this is my counseling. At the end of the day, this is really like my counseling when I get to speak to guests like you, and I have other guests on. It helps me to be able to help other people that way. So I appreciate having you on here.
A little talk therapy mixed with podcasting.
I love it. It's podcast perfection. That's what it is.
Yes.
So that's just what it is.
It was an absolute honor. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate having you on. We'll definitely have you on in the future. So thank you for being here, and have a great day.
Thanks everyone for listening.